Okay, hello folks. Hi, I am Joshua Gonzalez. I am Education Director at Abundant Housing LA. Tonight we are here to start the first of a three-part series about ADUs or accessory dwelling units. We were approached by one of our high-level volunteers, Andrew Slocum, and the principal of ADU Development Company, Green Development Company, to do this free education for y'all to learn about ADUs. And so I said, yes, we need to do that. And so we're doing that right now. So, Andrew, if you'd like to take it over, I'll be here. Just let me know if you need anything, but this is your show, bud.
All right, very good. Thank you, Josh. Hello, friends, advocates, current and future developers. First of all, thank you so much for attending this live session. And for those of you who are listening to the recorded version, I hope you all walk away much more informed and knowledgeable about the process that goes into creating a plan set and a submittal set that not only gets approved by your local city, your local government, but also is buildable. That's not always the case. And then we'll learn the skill sets and the people that are involved in that process. Tonight we have three guests, speakers that are experts in their field to help demystify the process and help you gain valuable knowledge on what the steps are in the development process and what that looks like. So first, I'll start off with Seth, and I'll have him introduce himself, and we'll speak to the other team members as well. Thank you.
Hi guys, my name is Sevak Karabachian. The principal at Karabachian Architects. We're a small firm that focuses mostly on residential. We do some commercial, but most of our projects include ADUs and residential, like I mentioned. Tonight's focus will be ADUs, and I'm going to be going over on what the role of the architect is, what we actually do. Andrew, do you mind? Next slide.
Let's let Ety introduce herself and we'll
Oh,
go
okay. Yeah, please go ahead. I thought we're go
No
ahead,
worries.
please.
No worries. Yeah, you're ready to go. My name is Ety Benichou. I'm a structural engineer. I've been doing this for about 23 years, a small accent, as I grew up and had the beginning of my education in Paris. Anyway, yeah, I've been practicing for 23 years, and I didn't start with residential. I started with like high-profile projects and realized that, it takes years to do them. Clients are not necessary, the people you want to work with. And I fell in love with housing development about 10 years ago. So for the past 10 years, that's what I've been doing. I've been working for one of the top firm architecture structural firm for 23 years and just started my new company, EBSC. So with mine, I'll be focusing on residential development, providing the structural service for it. And I'm looking forward to tell you more about what we do and how we make it efficient for everybody.
Thank you, Ety. And Mo, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hello, hi guys. Thank you for joining. This is Moe Nhayli. I work with a company in California, we do all type of MEP and energy compliances in California and in other states as well. So I'll be focusing on the energy compliance and what it needs to be complying with the new regulations of Title 24. I'm happy to be here.
Very good. That's our team, everyone. And let's go back to Sev, and we'll start with the role of the architect or designer.
So the role of the architect, as it comes in early in the project, should be the very first stop. Most of the calls end up being through a contractor, but the architect should be the first stop that you call during the phase of the process. And the basics will include making sure they're licensed, insured, and ask always for references. And that's kind of the key to kind of make everything get the basics out of the way. More importantly, have someone that understands what you need. So communication is going to be heavy, and then understands constraints of what is happening on site specifically. So the role of the architect, as you'll see tonight, it seems very linear. We're going to be presenting plans, elevations, etc. But it's really kind of the conglomeration of all those coming together and being in charge of all the changes that happen in coordination with the structural engineer, energy calculator, all those consultants involved. You're kind of guiding everyone to make sure that the project is meeting the owner's goals. Next slide. So we've kind of chosen a small ADU project that has a little bit of complexity to it. It's a 2-story ADU. The first level is a garage. Second floor is the ADU itself. It's a typical residential lot and typical constraints. As Andrew mentioned, you know, the ADUs are abundant and you can almost place them anywhere at this point, but there are still constraints that you have to realize really quickly. And a floor plan is a very good starting point for that. Most of the time, it'll start with hand sketches and very rough and quick. And then the floor plan becomes a little more stable, as you see here, and more in a software that you can kind of make sure all the scale is working correctly. Next slide. Once we have the floor plan laid out that the owner is happy with, that we're happy with, we start working on the elevations. And next slide. And this is the front elevation you see. So this is something you would have never thought of when you looked at the floor plans, which look more like boxes. But in this case, the elevations are yet another layer of design that needs to go into the work. Next slide. And then once those elevations are figured out, the questions of materiality comes into play as far as what are these surfaces? What are they made out of? And all those need to be figured out at some point. And kind of the rule of thumb is if you don't decide, the contractor is going to decide for you, and you might not be happy with that decision. So it's our job as the architect to coordinate with all the consultants and make sure that all those consultants' requirements are being met and all the materials that the owner would like is being delivered. And next slide. And then you can see the same project under construction. And the role of the architect is really from beginning till end, and in most cases, the lifetime of the project, where you're constantly visiting back all these tools, the floor plans, elevations, sections. When something is updated or changed based on consultant feedback, it's our job to make sure that change is working with other consultants' work, our work, and whatever the city has required. And these changes happen all the time. It happens during construction, even where the contractor will say, this isn't working. So we have to circle back and constantly use those tools. So it's not a very linear process like the slides have shown. It's more of a circular process. So that's really kind of the short version of what a role of the architect is.
So Sev, can you give us an idea of what some of the essential skills and attributes a good architect or designer would have?
Definitely. I believe communication is, it sounds cliche, but communication is one of the most, it's a fundamental attribute that a good designer needs to have, is just to be able to communicate and understand what the owner is looking for. And that trait is going to follow the architect throughout the coordination with all the consultants. You can have the most beautiful design, but if you can't communicate and if you can't understand the consultant's needs, you're not going to get that project built, or it's going to be a very painful process.
Love it. Let's go into a couple of critical questions that a homeowner, or someone who's looking to do an ADU may want to know. So let's start with, what are some of the key factors to consider when selecting an architect or an engineer? What do you think?
The fundamental items I mentioned earlier are making sure they're licensed. Just that fact alone kind of eliminates a lot of odd people you might meet because the licensing process is so lengthy. And if someone can get through that, it's a great start. Making sure they're insured. And one of the most important things is references. So consider their references, call them and talk to them. We send usually a long list of our references to a potential client, and I'll say, just call any of them you want. I'm not going to give you 3. I'll give you 45 of them. Call whoever you want and just ask them what it was like working with us. That's key. That goes a long way, and that kind of puts them at ease to understand that we know what we're doing. So if you ask them for references and they kind of go away, that's not that's not a right person.
Very good. Now, say that person is trying to ensure that their vision aligns with what you're putting together. How should that client work with you to ensure not only their vision, but also knowing that there are rules that you have to adhere to, whether or not you like them or not?
Yeah. At some point, we as architects have to put our ego aside and definitely need to listen to the owner's needs or wants. I've worked at Frank Gehry's office for 12 years, and I've seen a lot of high-profile clients come and they say something to Frank. Frank is, world-famous architect, and they would say, Frank, I really don't like this color of the plywood. And I would be standing there kind of on the sideline listening, and I think like, who are you telling this architect, like, what gives you the right? And I would expect him to say something like that. And he'd say, no problem. We'll try another plywood. We'll try a different grain. And something always good came out of that. So you have to put your ego aside and just listen to what the client needs, and something better always comes along the way. So that's key, is just play ball with the owner.
I love that. I love being mindful of ego, but also understanding who this is going to be that's living in there as well.
Right.
That's very important. So you worked on all different types of projects in Frank's office, but what challenges are more unique that you face when designing ADUs?
The biggest challenge, as you know, would be the permitting process, which, as you know, as small as most ADUs are, they still have a lot of challenges in them during the permitting process. So there's still constraints. So you need to know, you have to talk to the right people and understand what those constraints are. And it varies from city to city. And Andrew and I talk all the time about these things. So um, to me, the permitting process is pretty challenging. The rest, maybe it comes easy for us, or it's fun, but the permitting process is definitely a challenge.
I can agree more. And I think, the idea that ADUs are small homes or that they should be easier. And really, the answer is these are still homes, and
Yeah.
they still have to go through the same rules and the same process. Even if it is a little bit faster, you still have to build something that hits all of the metrics that a home does, and that is livable to the stringent rules that California has. All right. Next, we're going to move to Ety, and she is going to talk to us about the role of the structural engineer and what they do in the process.
Yes, thanks for having me. So, a structural engineer, sometimes we always wonder, is it an architect? That's what I'm being told often when I say what my role is or what I do. And it's not, though we have to be about as creative as an architect, because what we do is to kind of come up with solution that allow the vision of the owner and the architect to be possible. And we have to do it in a way that's possible, but most importantly, cost efficiently, both from a buildability standpoint and from actual cost, right, of the material or the system that we're going to be using. So just the same way that Sevak was saying, we love to be here from the get-go. and collaborate with the design team to understand what are the parameters that we're dealing with. First of all, are we dealing with a new construction or an existing construction? Are we dealing with, because it's different codes that apply, whether you're doing something ground up or whether you're dealing with an existing building. I'll talk about both kind of very quickly. But basically on a new construction, you have a lot more flexibility. You can really give the designer and the owner a lot of creativity a lot of opportunities to come up with what they want and the shape that they want and the volume that they want. When you work with an existing and the system that we're going to be doing on a ground up ADU is usually a wood structure, a conventionally wood structure, because that would be really the most cost efficient. You'll cover it up anyway. It's the lightest one, which would allow very small foundation system, which would require less digging and stuff like that. So we would talk about systems on a ground up ADU. But that we'll work with all the consultants as well to coordinate how things fit. And so a ground up is kind of like a brand new house, and it's pretty straightforward, I would say. For the existing ADUs, that's the one that are a little bit more challenging. And really you have two parameters that are two starting point is, do you have existing drawings? Or are you starting from scratch, having to do as built? That could be a dollar number that needs to be considered. And there you need to be very creative because, usually you would put your ADUs in a closed like laundry or a gym that's unused or things like that, spaces that are unused in your existing building because things have changed in that building and you don't need them anymore. And so literally what you are going to want are openings. When you take out structure from an existing building, to go to you have to comply with the California existing building code, which is a different code than the conventional residential building code when you start from scratch. So there are a bunch of things that we want to coordinate with an architect and the designer and the and the owner from the get-go to help them optimize locations, sizes of opening, to prevent, for example, an existing building having to do a complete seismic retrofit. So there's a lot of things that we would love to be involved from the beginning before everything is set and we say, okay, now put in a structure. We really want to work together to define all the best, most cost-effective systems. So maybe what I want to show you is go through what is a structural set looking like? What information are we going to provide you guys, And so maybe we can go through that. So a structural set, and I'm not going to show you all the sheets, but just a few sheets. For example, the first 2-3 sheets are just going to be notes, general notes, to go over basic information on each material that we want to, comply with norms, with codes, specification. And then we're going to define, the observation that we want to do to make sure that a contractor understand our design intent that we try to communicate on our structural drawings, along with the required inspection that are required by a third party, a deputy inspector that the owner has to hire to verify a few important elements. Okay, next page. And then, so once we've kind of gone through the ground rule, like our spec, let's just call them, we come up with our structural plans. And we always start with our roof, second level or foundation. In a case of a ground up, that would be a, kind of a 2-story, but it'd be a very similar setup on an existing drawing. And as you can tell on the background, we would have the architectural drawing, right? It's very important that we understand the functionality of the building, where we can place elements, where we can place walls, where we can place posts, things that would, invade your open spaces, where we can put windows, things like that. So when we work with the architectural background and start placing element that matches with the architectural background, without changing the occupancy or the interior and exterior space that we want to see and use. And so that's what we'll see. Each of the floor plan call out for joist, for beams, for post, for walls. And the bubbles that you see popping out refer to typical details. which is what you will see, sorry, on the next page. Sorry. So on the next, maybe you move on to the next and I'll come back.
Yeah. Okay. Let's let Ety catch
Sorry.
herself. You know that what you're seeing here, and I understand it may be a little blurry, is what these sheets that your structural engineer will put together in coordination with your architect. So like this last sheet, these are the architectural drawings will be delivered to your structural engineer, and they will be making the decisions on what you're going to be putting in there for the different structural elements. And these little bubbles will refer to the details, which is this sheet right here. Ety?
Wow, you don't need me. Look at that.
I've done this
That's
once.
amazing. Yeah. So yeah, sorry about that, guy. It's been a long day. So yeah, we have those typical details that would tell oh my gosh, that would show the contractor what to do. And the point of the structural drawing is really to give the contractor a basis, a design intent. They should have everything they need to build it. But sometimes they may miss some information. And for that, we have a system called request for information. What that is, it gives them a platform for them to communicate with us any question that they have. And so they would send us their question, we would answer, we would potentially go to the site also and do the structural observation to make sure they understand our drawings. Okay, next.
All right. So here we have the essential skills and attributes for a structural engineer. So Ety, as a professor in structural engineering, what do you believe is an essential skill and an attribute that a solid structural engineer should have?
I mean, many. I think it's not just one, but for sure, being able to communicate clearly is fundamental. Not being able to understand other trades is also critical. Getting a set of architectural plan and starting framing without understanding what else is coming, like mechanical, electrical, plumbing, even when you go to different trades, like stairs or like elevators, if you have one. We're not going to necessarily have one on ADU, but understanding all the different trades is fundamental. So as a structural engineer, you have the basic skills of a structural design, but it's not enough. You need to make sure you take an engineer, or you choose an engineer that has experience working with all the other trades. I'm so sorry, guys. You need to choose an engineer that also is open to suggestion from contractors. That's fundamental, because you may have one way, but contractor who has experience always come up with different ways. It's important to listen and be innovative and incorporate other systems or other connections or things that a contractor is used to do. And then it's also important, to understand the cost that's available and who's going to be using that ADU, understanding who your tenants are going to be and what is the client budget. So based on all of those are very important factors that allow us as a structural engineer to make decisions on the systems that we would be choosing or advising the client to follow.
I think that's great. That's something I've learned from you, is that every change you make has something else that it changes something else. So when you change maybe the mechanical, it does affect the structural, it does affect the architectural. So all of these changes matter, because when you change one thing, everything changes. And there's also implications on cost, which is something that we want to be very well aware of, because most of the time these are something we want to offer at an affordable rate, or it's for a family member. And we are not designing backyard Taj Mahals most of the time. It is really something that we want to offer to people to live in, and the livability for it.
Yeah. So I think, some of the skill that you see on the screen are really basic that you would expect out of any structural engineer. The one that makes the difference is really one that has experience, that can communicate, that can ask the right question from the get-go. And that really understands all the parameters, not just from an architectural standpoint, but from a cost and constructability standpoint. That's when you know that you'll be in good hands and that you'll make it work. If you can choose one that has relationship with your plan checkers, I mean, with the city, that also helps. I know when they see my stamp personally, because I've worked with them and I've trained them too, at least the new staff that they have, then that really helps because they know that they can trust the engineer that's going to submit those drawings.
That's another great point, that relationships matter and communication matters from all parts of this as well. When you're working with the city, if they've worked with you before, you will definitely get a different interaction than the first time you come in. It's all the way across the board. You'll hear this in our next meeting. And with the construction as well, is that the relationship building, that trust building is every part of this. Let's jump into what questions a client, a homeowner, a developer should have on who the right structural engineer is. And I want to preface this first, that not every homeowner is going to make this decision. Sometimes your architect is going to make a recommendation, or like say, sometimes when people work with me, I have these people. And although I'm open to working with your people, most of the time it all is encompassing. So you're not always getting the chance to pick that person, but we're going to talk to you like you are the backyard developer that you are. And we have some questions for you on what the right structural engineer is for you. So let's start with the first one. What are the key qualities that make up a good structural engineer for an ADU project?
Yeah. So for an ADU, I think cost is fundamental. And so, like I said, you really have to choose an engineer that knows both ground up and existing condition, because even if you're going to do it in your backyard, there might be existing condition that you're going to have to deal with, whether it could be utilities, you might be close to a pool, you might be really close to your existing main house. You have to know all the parameters. So I think a good structural engineer would need to be familiar with new construction, existing construction, and have a lot of experience, a lot of experience in wood construction, concrete construction, existing buildings, specifically for ADU, okay? And then be able to come up with creative solution that assist the client in terms of costing the project to the expectation that they have to start with.
There we go. I wasn't able to unmute myself. Okay, so Ety, I met you on a somewhat, we would say, a difficult project, a 40-foot hillside where we're putting a 7-story building on, 190 units or so. How does the structural engineering differ from, say, an ADU project compared to one of these large projects? I mean, you still have to have footings, right? How much does it differ?
Yeah. I mean, the truth is, it's much, much simpler. I mean, really, really much simpler. But the other thing is when you do large projects and you have a set of very complicated detailing, and you might be, coming up with like more advanced design, you want to be conscious of the fact that an ADU might not require that kind of level of design or detailing. And so you want to be able to lighten up those to make it cost efficient, because using the same approach that you use on a large scale project will kill the cost of an ADU. You need to be able to build it faster. You need to optimize the amount of material that you're using so that you, again, keep in mind that cost, right? And build faster. So the fact that you're designing a smaller structure needs to be factored in compared to a much larger project. So those are the important things. I provided you a completely different set on an ADU ground up than we did on a much larger project. And again, there's ADU ground up and there's ADU when you add units in a big building. that's a completely different animal depending on what you want to do. If you're just changing a little bit of the interior, is not a big deal. But when you start adding large penetrations in the exterior concrete or part of your lateral resisting system, that starts to become a little bit more complicated, that might impact the overall existing structure, may require or trigger a mandatory seismic retrofit, which would be a cost that you may not anticipate when you just wanted to add 2-3 units to your buildings. So there's that's why, depending on the project you're going to be looking at, you want to be reminded or mindful of what type of ADU you're considering doing.
All right. And the last question, and this is something that's really important because many times I get the question that a conversion is easier than a ground up construction. I have to say that you're working with a blank canvas when you're building something brand new, and conversions are slightly different. So on an engineering standpoint, what considerations are involved with converting, say, an existing garage or an existing structure to an ADU?
I've done both. I mean, obviously the preference is to start from scratch, just because the cost of the wood that you're going to be adding is not significant. When you're working with an existing surface, right, you're restricted, really, really restricted, and you have to add on to an existing condition. It's actually might require more labor to try to keep what you have and add on to it. And obviously you still have work to do on the inside and on everything. You still have a lot of work to do. So when you do a brand new structure, you can really optimize the product you're going to get. And so it's worth doing a cost comparison. It's important you work with a structural engineering that's able to give you quick estimates based on 2 situations so you can make an informed decision. But obviously, starting from scratch is always giving you so much more opportunity. And I think it's worse. I don't think there's a huge delta by completely taking off the structure and building a new one than keeping a garage and trying to upgrade it by adding a level, trying to strengthen your wall, strengthen your footing. It's a lot of work for what it is to start from scratch. So, but again, it may be worth it on a 1-story. Like the one I did it was a 1-story. We just kept everything at a few openings and just resurfaced the interior. We made 1 ADU. But if you want to optimize, you could do 2 ADU instead of 1 garage, for example. That would be a lot better to go to the start from scratch. So again, those are discussions you may want to have with your engineer from the get-go, so you can price it and decide what is best for the project or for what you want.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ety.
Mm-hmm.
Moe, you're up. And I have to say that the job of the Title 24 and the energy consultant is even a mystery to me sometimes on what it is that they are doing and what the formulas are. And I'm learning from you and working with you, but this is something that I'd say that we are always learning. I don't care how much experience you have, there's always this learning. So take it away. What is the Title 24 energy compliance for ADUs and what do you do?
Okay, thank you, Andrew. So yeah, Title 24. So basically, it's the part 6 of the building code of the California Building Code, which talk about all the energy and the compliance that you need to have. California is like very stringent when it comes to energy. I can say that I've been working in all the states, but California is the most stringent one for the energy. Since this is what like California Energy Commission is taking, they're taking the lead in reducing the footprint of the energy and the carbon monoxide for used by the people. And they're taking the lead as well to go all electric. And this is what mandates a lot of things now in the Title 24. So basically, Title 24 can be done in 2 ways. The first one is prescriptive, which you will follow the code like point by point, and that will comply. But the second way that we always use and we prefer to use is the performance path, where you can trade off between things. For example, as you can see here, you have the insulation of the building, the window U values, and the efficiency of the windows, the efficiency of the HVAC mechanical unit that you have, the water heaters. So we can trade off between these things to make the Title 24 comply. And and the best thing about that is that we can coordinate with the architect and the structural engineer in order to fit, to make it, to work together to see the insulation requirement and trade-off between the insulation, better insulation, but lower HVAC efficiency, or better lighting and the lower water heater. So this is where we coordinate all together, the architect and the structural and the mechanical engineer and the electrical engineer to make the Title 24 work. Um, so Okay, next, please. Okay, so this is like a sample of the Title 24 that you will have for single families and ADUs. We work in a software called Energy Pro, and we do the simulation there. It depends, the bigger factors depends on the conditioned area that you have and the climate zones you are working on. And then we simulate together and send it like a draft to the structural engineer and to the architect to see if everything is working together. And then we submit to the city. This is like a sample of the Title 24 that you have. The next page as well is also a sample where it shows the mandatory requirement of the Title 24 and HVAC cooling and heating calculation that we do as well on the Title 24. So next page, please.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Sure. I don't really understand what that HVAC system and heating is. I think that's something new I've been seeing. Can you really quickly, while I'm here, teach me what it is that I'm looking at?
Yeah, sure. So for residential, we cover three big things on the Title 24, which is the envelope. The envelope is the insulation that you have on the floor, the ceiling, the walls, and the roof. For the envelope also, you have the windows, which are the efficiency of the windows that you have and the doors. The second part is the mechanical. So basically, we simulate what is the unit that you have. If it is ducted or ductless unit, if it is a heat pump or a furnace. So here in this paragraph, which is HVAC system heating and cooling, they showed you what is the calculated load that you have versus the system that you are proposing. So, for example, when you go with like an inverter system, which is like very efficient, that will give you credits on the Title 24 and make it better to work. The ductless system always is better than the ducted, since you have you can have like a thermostat in each room, and you can make zonal in a way that it's not central, and every time you turn on the AC, the air will be in the whole room or the whole building. So that will make it more efficient. This is, for example, what is HVAC. And basically you have the efficiency of the units, which goes with SEER number, we call it. It's from 13 up to 25. The more you go to 25, the more efficient is the unit. So this is the HVAC system, and you have the water heater. And if you go to let's talk about solar first. If you go to the next page. Okay. So a lot of like architects and owners don't like to put solar because it's maybe like it's not easy to put solar on the roof, or they don't want to pay for solar. But for the ADU project, for example, sometimes you need to do solar. If you have a conversion from, now the recent things that you convert a garage to an ADU, to an ADU, in this case, you don't need solar since it's a conversion. You have the existing unit and you're converting it to ADU. But if you have a new construction next to the main house, we need to do the calculation to see if we need solar or not. And here you can see the formula that we use for the solar. And I'm showing you an example here for a 500 square footage ADU for a climate zone 3. So we have two factors, the conditioned area and the climate zone that you have. And this is the formula here, which shows that you need 1.43 kilowatts of solar. Now I'm saying here that it's less than 1.8, which is a good exception that you should know about. So the exception is if you have less than 1.8 kilowatt of solar, you can just remove the solar. So in conclusion, any ADU with less than 500 square footage, doesn't need a solar. But if it is more than 500 and it's a new construction, the solar is mandatory now after the 2022 code. So this is for your information. The other part that I wanted to talk about, the third part of the Title 1 is the water heater, the plumbing system that you have. And this is also tricky because as California is leaning toward using electric more than gas, it's very hard now to comply with gas, for example. And usually for an ADU, which is around 500, 600, 700 square footage, clients tend to go with a smaller unit, which is the tankless, electric tankless, which you can see it here on the second page and the second images. For this as well, this is tricky because any ADU more than 500 square footage will not comply with electric tankless water heater. So you need to have a tank. And this is challenging for architects because the tank should be floor mounted and it takes a lot of area, which is 30 by 30 space if you put it inside the ADU. And if you put it outside the ADU, you need to have an enclosed room with a door for it. So this is sometimes we go back and forth with the architect to make it work and to see if we need a heat pump or not.
And this is why your energy consultant is such an integral part of the team as well. What you put in your energy modeling will determine the insulation that we use. It'll determine the mechanical, the plumbing, the equipment that we use. So everybody has their part in developing a plan set that will get approved and that is buildable. Mo, can you tell me some of the traits that a proficient Title 24 engineer would have? What makes you so good, and what are the rest of your peers? What should they be knowledgeable about?
Yeah, so basically, as I said earlier, the good Title 24 engineer don't go with a prescriptive path. They always go with the performance path. And this is because you can trade off between trades. And here, in this, you can coordinate better with the architect and the structural engineer to make it all work with the less cost that you have. So always go with performance pass and have a little room to trade off between the three components of the Title 24.
All right, very good. So now I have some questions for you. What should a homeowner, a developer, a person who is looking to hire their Title 24 consultant, what are some of the key questions that they should know? And we'll start with, what are the main elements of the Title 24 energy compliance? And I know you're going to be repeating yourself, but let's go over it one more time.
Yeah, the ADU is I can say an easy part, but again, you can also see it as a single family house. So everything need to be aligned together. The main component, as we said, is the envelope itself, the mechanical system that you put, and the water heater that you put. They all work together in order to know the energy of your building.
Okay, great. So now what you're saying is some of those design and construction choices affect the calculations?
Definitely. Yes. For example, I can say that if we have a 2x4 wall, it can fit like this insulation. And if the Title 24 doesn't comply with this R13 insulation, you need to add an internal insulation or an external insulation. So the architect should know about that to see maybe the square footage of the room will be smaller if we add 1 inch of insulation from inside. So the conditioned area from inside to inside will be less. So maybe the architect will tell me, no, we need to make it work. So we can trade off with the roof insulation or make it the mechanical system as an inverter. So this is why it definitely affect the design and the construction.
Yeah, that is something I've learned from you, Mo, is that there are trade-offs, and we may get points from one part of the project that we do more so that we can subtract points from other points in order to get there.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so what tools and software do you use when you're doing your calculations?
Yeah, so we have two softwares. One software that CEC
The
gift to all
CEC
people.
is, what is
It's an
that?
open source, but it's very hard to use it as a trade-off technique. And this is why we use the Energy Pro, 9.21 now, which is approved by the California Energy Commission. So we use it for residential and non-residential compliances. And you have two websites that are also approved by Title 24, which are Cheers and CalCerts. These two, we sign the Title 24. So unless you sign the Title 24, you cannot submit it to the city. You need to sign it by either two of these websites, which is Cheers or CalCerts, and then you can submit to the city.
Very good. Thank you, Mo.
Yeah.
Much appreciated. Next, we have gone through the three major parts of the plan set, and we'd like to open it up to any questions that anyone has by either typing in the chat or unmuting yourself. We have a little bit of time left, so please feel free. There's no stupid question. Any of us are welcome to ask each other questions. We'll see if anyone has anything.
Just because it seems maybe relevant. I know that we talked a lot about how permitting is maybe one of the hardest parts. So, as Abundant Housing LA is, a policy sort of advocacy organization, like, what's your experience been with ED1? And does that have an effect on any parts of the permitting that y'all have been referring to?
Let me see here. All right, sorry about that. So the question was ED1, which is Executive Directive 1, which doesn't necessarily have connection with ADUs, although many people are using ADUs in their Executive Directive 1s. But one thing that is very comparable to the two is ADUs have a certain timer that a city and a local government has in order to review your plans. And many people get a little bit confused by this. There's 60 days for responses. Your plans aren't going to be approved in 60 days. When you submit your plans, there's a 60-day turnaround for corrections. Corrections meaning that maybe Ety needs to make some changes or some clarifications to her structural sheets. Maybe Moe needs to change parts of his electrical calculations, or maybe Sevak has to change many of his stuff, where it usually turns into making text amendments and some changes in the architectural sheets, as each municipality has its own little part of it. So what I like about accessory dwelling units is that it teaches local governments how to streamline, how to be faster, because that's one of the issues that we see, is that before Executive Directive 1, we had 3 to 5 years in timelines to go through this process that ADUs are doing in these sometimes 4 to 6 month periods. And so by coming together as our side to submit better plans, local governments are learning how to streamline as well. Concurrent reviews, departments speaking to each other, not having everyone be their own island. And I think that is an important part that we need to see as the housing crisis, it becomes more and more that local governments need to work together and streamline the review and the approval of plan sets and submittals. And really, it's a process. And ADUs have been a very, if not one of the most successful processes in order to streamline permit approval. And we can take those skills and those processes and translate them into larger multifamily buildings that we're seeing with Executive Directive 1. Thanks for the question, Josh. I see a question from Mark, and it says, have any of the professionals here worked with pre-approved plans from the city of LA? Do those plans take engineering and Title 24 into account? And I'll open it up to see if anyone else has, and then I'll chime in if.
I haven't actually. I haven't yet.
Yeah. I'm a little bit surprised as well. I've never met or heard of anyone that's used them. I have met many teams that have developed them. And SCAG, the Southern California Association of Governments, gave many local governments grants in order to develop them. But unfortunately, Mark, I don't know if there's any data on the success of it as well. And even people in the planning department from City of LA have not been able to give me that information. I will say that there are still parts of that have to adhere to where you're putting it. Because every single parcel is different, all the soil is different. So I think it is a great idea, and I am really curious about the execution as well. But more often than not, you end up having to put a team together, because it is going to get you what you're looking for the type of people that are going to be living there. Great question. Thanks, Mark. I wish I had a better answer for you.
No, but also, I mean, for sure you'll need somebody, because the seismic parameter and the soil parameter are different depending on the sites. And so no matter what, your lateral system needs to be revised, your foundation will need to be revised. But I think it's a great idea to have a prototype that could be, used on ADU if you don't have a size restriction.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, single stories are going to be a lot much easier than a 2-story, where you're going to need to really know your soil's condition to design your footing and your foundation, right? Yeah. All right. Very good. Let's see. Was there any other questions here? All right. Josh, can you give us an update on the next 2 sessions?
Yes, you got it. So again, this is a 3-part series. Our next one is going to be Friday, May 10th at 3 p.m. It's an in-person session. So it's the one of the 3. We decided to get wild, decide we were going to meet in person for one of them. So that is actually going to be in downtown LA. That's going to be at the Block. We have a registration for that. I put some links in the chat earlier. Let me copy them and put them in there again. So yes, and that will be Friday, May 10th, 3 p.m. in downtown LA. The 3rd session is going to be Thursday, May 23rd, 2004. It will be very much like this one. It'll be 6:30 to 7:30 p.m. on Zoom. So we hope that we see all of y'all at all of them. Is parking free? So actually, I believe that we have a cool little relationship with the block where we can get validated parking. So if you are going to drive to the second session, know that you'll have to register and let us know that you're coming, so that way we can give them a list of names, and that will include parking and other things. Where in the block? So there, I believe we're going to be on the 19th floor. It's a shared space thing. They let people use, like nonprofits, use the space. And Mark is correct. It is right above the 7th Street Metro Center station. So take transit. That's a great way to get there. It's right there. So it's perfect. So yeah, that's it. Friday, May 10th, and Thursday, May 23rd. Hope to see you all there.
Yep, the second meeting in person will be recorded, from my understanding, right, Josh? So we'll be able to put that out there, and that is going to be with some individuals on the city side. So we want to demystify what it is when your plan check goes into the void, and what it is they're doing in that 60-day time period, and some tips and tricks from their side. And you know, I think it'll be very informative to me, because I want to understand, you know, what is going on during that time frame, and what we can do to be better and make that a relationship stronger, because at sometimes it does feel like an adverse relationship, and we're all here for the same goal. And I think we want to get to yes instead of getting to no, which is where we have a mentality of, and that needs to change if we're all going to work together. Our third session is going to have two really great general contractors and a owner that's going to educate you on an owner, what you need to do in order to get the right general contractor. And these two general contractors are amazing. They've been working with me for years. And so they're going to be a wealth of information on helping you determine who you're going to pick and what you should look for in your bid, and make you that much more stronger of a backyard developer. And so I really thank you all for coming tonight. I appreciate all the speakers. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you for your expertise. Thank you for working with me. Hopefully you'll be working with some of the people who are watching this, that are attendees, that are looking at it in the future. I think years from now, as ADUs get stronger and stronger. And we look forward to seeing you all at the next session and for the rest of the educational series that Abundant Housing has. Thank you, Abundant Housing, and thank you, Josh.
Thank you.
y'all.
Bye, everybody.
Have a good night.